Hey guys, welcome to another video, and I hope you like this incredible picture of two fighting legends next to each other, Bruce and Mike Tyson. And obviously it's an AI generated image and it's not quite to scale, but it's enough to help me get across the point of this video, which is we're going to be discussing Zen in the art of combat. And what is well known is that Bruce Lee was very much into philosophy and stuff like that, and definitely into Zen. But what you might not know is that Mike Tyson was also into Zen. So it's well known that Bruce was a student of Eastern philosophy and was very influenced by Zen. He makes references to Zen and Taoism in his movies, television appearances, and books, such as the Tao of Gung Fu. Taoism has a deep connection to Zen in its transmission through Chan Buddhism. Chan is the word which translated into Japanese becomes Zen. So it's kind of, you have to imagine Chan, Zen. You know, the Chinese actually introduced Chan Buddhism to Japan, and that's why you have this crossover with the words. Bruce writes in the Tao of Gung Fu, Gung Fu, the center of the Oriental arts of self-defense, is a philosophical art that serves to promote health, to cultivate the mind, and to provide an efficient means of self-protection. Its philosophy is based on the integral parts of the philosophies of Taoism and Chan, or Zen, the ideal of being with and not against the force of the opponent. Elsewhere, Bruce writes, during sparring, a Gung Fu man learns to forget about himself and follow the movement of his opponent, leaving his mind free to make its own counter-movement without any interfering deliberation. He frees himself from all mental suggestions of resistance and adopts a supple attitude. His actions are all performed without self-assertion. He lets his mind remain spontaneous and ungrasped. As soon as he stops to think, his flow of movement will be disturbed and his opponent will immediately strike him. Every action, therefore, has to be done unintentionally without ever trying. Now, as I said, not many people know this, that Mike Tyson, who's now regarded in pop culture as somewhat of a wise sage in some respects, he's a very open, deep and truthful person. Despite his public persona in his youth as a wild, terrifying brawler, he was actually practicing Zen. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean literally. He was aware of Zen and what it was, and he practiced it with Customoto. Now, if you don't believe me, I'm going to read to you an excerpt from Mike Tyson's book, Iron Ambition, Lessons I Learned from the Man Who Made Me Champion, referring, of course, to Customoto. So, we're just taking up from where Cuss is teaching Mike about how to become emotionally detached. And to quote Mike, he says here, when Cuss would talk to me about all this, he stressed that what he meant by intuitive thinking was acting unconsciously. Intuitive thinking wasn't distorted by any emotional interference. You become like a robot or computer, like Nike used to say in that commercial, just do it. Or like Cuss used to tell us, the body knows things that the mind doesn't know it knows. You have to do it in a split second. You can't have a chance to think about it. If you do, you'll get hit. Years after Cuss had developed this theory of controlling your emotions and getting to an intuitive state, he talked to Norman Mailer about it one day in Mailer's house in Stockbridge. Cuss recounted that conversation to a Mailer biographer. We talked at length and probably more deeply about the mind and emotions in boxing than we had before. I gave him my definition of a real pro, a man who can be completely impersonal, who doesn't allow his emotions to get involved with anything he does, who's able to be constantly objective. I don't like to say a lot of these things to just anyone because people say he's some kind of screwball, but with someone like Norman it's okay. Anyway, while we were talking, he suddenly excused himself and came back with a book, Zen in the Art of Archery. He asked if I'd read it, and I told him no, I'd never heard of Zen. He said, "Are you sure? Because you don't know it, but you practice Zen." Later, having read the book several times, I realized that the principles I use do involve that kind of thing, developing an impersonal state without interference from any emotions. We talked about fear because when you become impersonal, you control fear, separate it from your mind and body. Because of my concentration, I've been hit by blows and never felt them. I was there but outside my body, I could see myself throwing punches just like I was watching somebody else, and it happens automatically, intuitively. And then Mike continues here and says, by the time I came to Cuss, he was using that Zen book as part of his curriculum. Cuss probably thought it was too hard for me to read when I was 14, so he read it to me. This book is the account of a German philosophy professor who studied a form of Japanese archery for 6 years in Japan in the 1920s. And in listening to Cuss read the book's introduction by Daisetsu Suzuki, a famous Zen scholar, I knew that this wasn't just some lesson to apply to boxing, but they were life lessons as well. One of the most significant features we notice in the practice of archery, and in fact of all the arts as they are studied in Japan and probably also in other Far Eastern countries, is that they are not intended for utilitarian purposes only or for purely aesthetic enjoyments, but are meant to train the mind, indeed to bring it into contact with the ultimate reality. Archery is therefore not practiced solely for hitting the target. The swordsman does not wield the sword just for the sake of outdoing his opponent. The dancer does not dance just to perform certain rhythmical movements of the body, Mr. Suzuki wrote. The mind has first to be attuned to the unconscious if one really wants to be master of an art. Technical knowledge of it is not enough. One has to transcend techniques so that the art becomes an artless art, growing out of the unconscious. In the case of archery, the hitter and the hit are no longer two opposing objects, but are one reality. Interesting, very similar to what Bruce is saying. The archer ceases to be conscious of himself as the one who is engaged in hitting the bullseye which confronts him. This state of unconsciousness is realized only when, completely empty and rid of the self, he becomes one with the perfecting of his technical skill. Zen is the everyday mind. And I'm just going to go a little bit forward here in the same chapter, according to Mike. Cuss used to give me lessons on how to have out-of-body experiences. I would be sitting down and watching television and he'd say, let's do a session. And he'd sit next to me and then he'd say, transcend, focus, relax until you see yourself looking at yourself. Tell me when you're there. Learning how to detach yourself from your feelings was essential for me. It's like teaching yourself to be a professional liar. If I can't separate from my emotions in the ring, then I'm just a punk. I'm too emotional out there. I might hit a guy with a hard punch and then I get scared if he doesn't go down. So learning that Zen detachment was definitely a survival skill for me. Isn't that interesting? That both of these incredible martial artists who had very different public personas both shared the same essential philosophy. And I just thought that was really worth talking about and sharing with you guys. If you found this video fascinating or interesting, please like, share and subscribe to the channel and hit the bell notification for when I upload more content. In the meantime, check out some of the other videos on the channel that I've been making. Feel free to explore and see if it's for you and have a look around. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.